what.
Question for you. You were still making art back then, but this kind of graphic and this Nashville signage just caught the power law and just went straight up.
Yeah, it's supply and demand, right? You can make what you want all day. It doesn't mean that anyone has to like it or buy it.
Correct.
And there was some internal artistic conflict there. That's probably just young, youthful, brash ego. But it was a very good educational experience in terms of from a business perspective, since this is a art business podcast. And yeah, it's hard. I should probably write all this down at some point, but I don't want to take up this entire hour talking about that. But needless to say, like in that time period for the next 5 or so years, I'm very grateful. Once in a lifetime experience. Like the image literally went around the world. It was in international publications. People from every continent that has people, when they came to Nashville, like they came to take their photo with it. And obviously I did well since I had the copyright and everything and the trademark. I essentially inadvertently had to learn how to build a brand and build a company. So that was really great experience. And then just cool stuff, man. Foo Fighters came to town, and Taylor, R.I.P. Taylor, got to meet him briefly. And then the next night he wore one of my shirts on stage at the Ryman. That's really cool. Wouldn't have gotten to do that any other way.
Look, I can almost hear a little hesitation. It was like a graphic thing. It was a T. It turned into a business. But you're like I Love New York guy, right?
Your words, not mine.
But you created like a piece of art that became synonymous with the city, right? I know as an artist, you can probably think, oh, it's just like a t-shirt, whatever it is. But that was your art, man. That's super cool.
Yeah. From an art perspective, whether it's music or art or anything, it's so incredibly rare to have any level of success, let alone something to that scale. I can't even begin to fathom at this point how many people have seen it. I'm not even talking about come take their picture. I can't even fathom that. But you dream about it, but you never think it'll actually happen. And so I'm really super grateful for it. There's a lot of challenging moments and experiences, things I was not prepared for, did not know about. But the overall experience, I don't know how you couldn't be anything but grateful for that.
It's awesome. Now, so you have this business. You're obviously now kicking ass on this business, but obviously in your heart of hearts, you still have these artistic visions that you have that you want to create and make. And I assume you're creating art most of this time. Are you still creating art most of this time?
As anyone who is an artist or runs a business or is an entrepreneur knows, like most of your time is occupied by the business. I was not able to be as creative as I wanted to be. Murals were where I got to do that the most because people saw the success, I believe, in Nashville murals, and rightfully so, assumed that I painted murals. And I learned from my dad, you always just say yes. So when people ask me like, hey, do you want to paint a mural? I was, yes, I'll paint a mural. And I guess I'm all right at it because one thing led to another. And I got to do some really cool projects from that as well. I worked with a lot of really big companies or really interesting artists. That was the artistic output during that time. But besides, I would design stuff, but a lot of that design I never put out because the brand had transitioned more towards being Nashville focused. So that was the output there. I was designing a lot for myself. I just wasn't putting it out.
So you now have this journey. You have a business that's just, for all intents and purposes, churning cash. You get either the occasional mural job on the side. At what point did you decide, hey, I've had enough of this. I still want to pursue art for the sake of art's sake, and I want to be an artist?
Yeah, a couple of different things really led to that, which is 2017. And I guess this was also like where I realized that this had become, or I believe Nashville had become what it had become. So it got vandalized, which in any other city would not be a newsworthy occasion, or maybe it would be for like a day. But in Nashville, the city as a whole was very affected by this. Like it was in the news for several weeks.
Wow.
And on both sides, there was a lot of people who were personally hurt and offended and were like, how could anyone do this? And there's a lot of people who also, on the other side of it, were using it, I think, as a chance to let out their personal demons, which unfortunately got directed towards me. That was a very weird time, and I'm prone to anxiety like a lot of artists, so that did not help my mental health. Yeah, like I had, not to go too into it, but at one point, the neighbors in the complex where I had my shop were, yeah, you're getting death threats. Can you please call the cops? We don't want anyone to come fuck up our shops too.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure
not
my
cool.
girlfriend at the time also, that was a heavy thing for her because it's like, who's going to show up at the house? Because somebody actually did show up at my house once.
Art
Yeah.
gone bad.
Yeah. And I can reflect now and realize that probably has to do more with what's going on in their lives and not me personally. Like, what did I do to them? But at the time, it sure felt like that. So that was definitely like a moment where it's like, this isn't exactly what I intended to make my life's work
Okay.
or to dictate my life. And one funny story though is that the mayor at when it happened called me, but my phone had blown up since I woke up that morning, so I put on do not disturb. And so she had to leave a message and I had to call her back and I'm like, I'm really sorry I missed your call, Madam
That's,
Mayor.
that's amazing.
Um, yeah, she's a real nice lady though. And yeah, so that was the first thing. And I realized it had become something bigger than anything I had control over. The symbol itself, separate from the commerce, meant something to people. And it's taken me a long time to wrap my head around it, but that's a real honor right there. You don't get to
Oh,
ever make that happen, that people decide for themselves.
yeah, that's incredible, man. And I
Yeah.
assume it's a dividend that'll just keep paying indefinitely.
I'll never count on it, but I'm always appreciative of it when it does happen.
It's awesome.
That's about when it's like, all right, I got to figure this out because this business is not what I set out to do. Also, I didn't really set out to do anything other than work for myself. So I was like, I got to figure out what it is that I want to do. And just like I said, it got to a point where it's like, I got to get myself in a good spot mentally because I can't keep this up forever the way it is currently. And so I reached a point where I decided to sell the brand.
Okay.
Financially, it was good, but also really at the end of the day, I started thinking bigger picture of at one point, I literally thought to myself, artists don't have a great track record of living happy, productive lives. Is this the thing that I'm going to kill myself over?
Okay.
And I was like, I think I can do better.
Great.
No, that's a little tongue in cheek, but really what it came down to is like, this is not worth anything so drastic as that. I feel like I can do more and be happier. And I feel like I've done what I could hope, more than I could hope for with it in creating it. And like you said, I think people at that point, it's going to keep going off on its own from an artistic standpoint. So I decided to sell that and move on. And really, that year afterwards was really tough, processing all of the craziness that had happened. And also, it in some ways cost me that relationship. So processing that. And I had a meeting with a mentor and a friend of his at the time. And his friend, I was just saying what I'd done and what I like to do. And she was like, okay, so you're an artist, so you should probably just be an artist. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I was like, yeah, I'm an artist, but I got to have a gambit. And
You got thrust into it so quickly. So your connection of art to business was like intertwined from the get go, but in slightly adjacent to like art world stuff. I could see where that like to mentally get back there was probably not the easiest trip.
my rule from when I started the business and still now is to never try to make money. So I think if you try in anything artistic, if you're trying to make money, you're going to make bad art. The trick is once you make good art, then change out your hats and be like, all right, how do I then make this into a business? How do I sell this? And because anyone who thinks that art is not a business is not an artist, in my opinion. And maybe it's just me, but I think there's an art to the business side of it as well. I got both sides of the brain going on that. So I get excited by both things creatively and then business wise. It triggers the same part of my brain. So that was like 2018, 2019. And 2019, I'd done a few things here or there, but 2019, I rented a space from my friends. They let me do whatever I want. And they're just like, here you go. We're not using it. And I put on this ridiculous exhibition. There's a video of me painting this mural It's a full 360 all mural, like all the walls and the floor. And there's a couple other installations. And inside, I had took all the paintings I'd been painting and hung them up all over. I was really into the idea. I was just annoyed or bitter or whatever, but I was really into the idea of leaning into what success and influence and all the Instagram stuff when it was like transitioning to influencer is a job. And that's not a knock against influencers. I have friends who are influencers, but I was like, man, what is Instagram doing to our society? And what is it doing to art? I don't know that I like this. So I really like playing with a bit. And even if no one else is aware of the bit, and so that was my bit, is this is going to be a ridiculous fabrication of, yeah, influencer. So I hired a bunch of cocktail waitresses and they walked around with glasses of champagne and bottles, really nice bottles, but in the back we're actually pouring Trader Joe's champagne, which is actually really good, by the way. It had a champagne selfie station where people could buy bottles to then spray it themselves in front of a wall that said,
Oh, I like
you
that.
post too much. Yeah, it was really fun. And so it was a really good time. So I put on this thing. It was a successful event. I did a bunch of shows. And then right when I was like, you know what? I really need to like focus on this and lean into this if I'm going to make this my new business in painting and whatnot. And then I came back from a trip to Southeast Asia in the beginning of 2020. And there you go.